Hey everyone, welcome to the RTS Guided Programming Coaching Call. I'm Mike Tushir, and clearly we're doing things a little bit different this week. I'm trying a little different format, so hopefully this is more entertaining, a little bit more productive for you guys. But if you like it, let me know. If you don't, let me know that too. And this is for you guys, so we're trying to make this as user-friendly and helpful to you as possible. So with that, let's go on and get started answering some questions. Well, let's start with some executing the workout questions. First up, this question says, I see this week requires an exercise called wood chops. How do I do that? Good question. Probably the easiest way for you to do that is going to be to watch a tutorial video. And I know Performance U on YouTube has some good tutorial videos on wood chops. It's a cable movement. Typically, you can use a band for it as well. But the idea is to get you some rotational stuff into your training, because nothing we do powerlifting-wise is rotational. So we want to bring in just a little bit of rotational stuff to help keep you robust and keep you durable, so that you're not susceptible to injury and things like that. So what I'll do when I link these up in the guided programming forum, I'm going to, when I link these up in the guided programming forum, I'll include a link to the wood chop video that I found to be helpful. So I'll include that. Now, if you don't have any cables, I recommend that you do an exercise called bus drivers. And I looked for videos of somebody doing a good tutorial on bus drivers, and I haven't found one. So we're going to do one ourselves soon. But in the meantime, some key points that I want you to keep in mind. Make sure that you're flexing your glutes. You want to keep your glutes engaged so that your pelvis is neutral. Keep your abs engaged so that you don't want to have a lot of excessive arch when you're doing a bus driver. Check out a video or something so you get the general gist of the movement. Just remember to make sure to keep your glutes turned on, keep your abs engaged so that this core is nice and strong. And when you do the rotational piece with the barbell, it's not a huge movement. It's not like this grand twisting movement or anything like that. And you don't want to go all the way back with it. But the idea is that you twist a little bit. Your back shoulder is you're thinking down and back, and your front shoulder is going to be up and forward. And that's the thing that makes bus drivers difficult, is that, it requires kind of this bilateral cueing thing. But then you rotate to the other side, and it's kind of the opposite. Your rear shoulder is down and back, your front shoulder is up and forward, keeping your glutes engaged and your abs engaged as well. It doesn't have to be a really huge movement. A couple things to keep in mind. This was rotational stuff for powerlifting. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter how much weight you're using. Don't go crazy. You probably haven't done rotational stuff in a while. So take it easy to start. Have a nice slow build into it. There's no world championships for rotational movements. So keep your head on your shoulders. The idea here is to increase your durability. So don't get out of control with it. Don't push it so hard that you're going to get yourself hurt. Ease into these things just a little bit. So that's some stuff I want you guys to keep in mind regarding the rotational stuff. We will try to get some videos up of the bus drivers, good tutorial video, since I'm not able to find a good one that I like. You don't have to use a lot of weight with any of this stuff, but just we want you to engage in a little bit of rotational stuff to help keep you balanced. All right, next question says, for this week, I've got high bar squats on my priority one day. I normally do high bar squats as my competition style squat. Should I still stick with high bar for this week, or should I switch it out to a lower load variation like front squat? You should keep it as high bar squats. Lucky for you, you're used to this movement, so it shouldn't be a big transition for you. Yeah, just carry on and continue doing high bar stuff. Next question I've got asked me to explain density training. So to do that, I'm going to bring up my trusty notepad here, and hopefully this helps shed some light on density training. So density training, you'll get a protocol that's something like, let's see, might be military press, and it may call for something along the lines of 75% maximize in L 12 minutes. Something similar to that. So the idea is that you do your general warm-up. Then I want you to work up to the percentage that's required. And it may say 75%, but it's probably going to say something more like, 8 rep max load. So let's say your 8 rep max load is 75 pounds. So you're going to work up to 75 pounds, and you don't have to do an 8 rep max beforehand, but you want to load approximately an 8 rep max load. So you've got, say, 75 pounds, that's going to get you pretty close. Then when you're ready, you're going to start the clock. The idea is that you do as many total repetitions with this weight as possible in 12 minutes. So just a word to the wise, it's smart to pace yourself. So your first set might be something like 75 pounds for 5 reps, and that may be a 7 RPE. And then you may rest, minute, maybe 90 seconds, and you do 75 pounds again for 5, but this time it's an 8 RPE. Then the next time you do 75 pounds, maybe you only do 4, and now you're back down to 7 RPE. And then you rest only another minute and do 75, and you get the idea. You keep going until you keep going to get as much total volume as you can in the 12 minutes that's allotted to you. What will happen is by the very end of those 12 minutes, that last set, you're going to just rep out, and you may get 4. You may only get 2 or 3, but the idea is that you get as much as you can there at the end. This particular style of training is intended to be, it's going to give you a hypertrophy effect just because it's going to have an appreciable amount of volume in a short, it's going to have an appreciable amount of volume. Because it's a high amount of volume in a short time, it's going to give you a nice sport-specific energy systems effect. Think of it like sport-specific conditioning. You're training yourself to not rely on really long rest periods. So that's the idea. That's how we want you to execute it, and that's the purpose behind it. All right. Getting a little bit used to this newer interface. So, all right, next question up. We're into our program modification questions. This question says, my program includes push press. I used to have chronic shoulder pain until I dropped off military press and ab wheel for my program. Is there any substitute exercise for push press? Could the push press be more shoulder friendly than military press because the initiation of the movement with the legs? If overhead pressing gives you problems, then do not do it. It is not essential to the program. I would recommend that you try to get that checked out. If it's something like there's a muscular imbalance, or there's something going on that's preventing you from overhead pressing, let's correct that if we reasonably can. Now, if it's something like you've had an injury, like some sort of maybe a labrum tear, or you've had something going on that it's going to require surgery to fix, or it's just not going to happen at all, then that's fine. Overhead pressing is not essential, but I just want you to be, as much of a 100% capability athlete as possible. If overhead pressing is out for you, it's not a problem. You can still get good at powerlifting without overhead pressing. So if you need a substitute for push press, first of all, I don't think push press is going to be so much easier on your shoulders than just regular military press. I would start by generally reducing the grade. So start with something like incline press. If that's no-go either, you want to train your pressing muscles. Try to target your shoulders if possible. So if you have like a neutral grip bar or something like that, that could be helpful. Something that's going to allow you to really engage your front delt. That's going to meet the intent of what we're trying to do with the overhead work. So even something like front raises would be useful. Yeah, it would be useful, but I would prefer you do some sort of pressing, even, hey, dumbbell pressing, that works too. A lot of people can do kettlebell pressing even when they can't do barbells. Any of that stuff is fine. Just the idea is to train the pressing muscles, emphasize the front delt a bit. So use whatever exercise that you can do pain-free. All right, next question up says, my program includes front squat. Is it okay to replace it with the safety bar squat? Both squats are fine, but personally, I've enjoyed more the safety bar squat. If you can do, well, given that guided programming includes a minimal amount of specialized equipment, yeah, that's an okay substitution to make. You can include safety bar squat. I would encourage you though to do some front squat now and then. Maybe if you're really far out from a competition and you want to include a little bit more variety, I would encourage you to do a little bit of front squatting. But in general, that's a fine substitution. There shouldn't be any big deal with shouldn't be any problem with going ahead and doing safety bar squatting. All right, at this point, I think I'm through. I'm going to guess and say about half of the questions. Given that this is a new interface and whatnot, I want to check to see if there are any questions from those of you who are here watching live. So if you do have any questions, type those in and I'll get to them as soon as I can, as soon as I see them. Still getting a little bit used to the interface, but it's not too bad. Next up, we do have some GPP questions. This first one says, are there any ab exercises that are better than others? What are some of your favorites? For powerlifting, well, yeah, there are definitely some ab exercises are better than others. I tend to favor more static ab exercises, stuff that's more in the realm of anti-extension rather than spinal flexion. So what I mean is I really like ab wheel. I think ab wheel is great as long as it's not causing you any problems, as long as you can do it correctly. If you can't do an ab wheel correctly, then you probably need to scale down into a plank for a while. When you can plank for a substantial amount of time correctly, then you can probably progress into an ab wheel. And I just generally favor ab wheel. Some other exercises that are good, weighted sit-ups and stuff like that, I think are good, provided that you're keeping your technique solid. I don't like to see a lot of excessive spinal flexion and extension. So certain things like glute ham sit-ups, I'm not a fan of. Things that cause you, things that cause you to move your spine through an excessive range of motion. I don't see a lot of benefit in it from a powerlifting standpoint, and especially since we're training our body to kind of resist these compressive loads that you face in the squat or the deadlift. Anyway, from what I understand from listening to Stu McGill, a lot of excessive bending is not good for your discs. And just kind of adding my understanding of things on top of that, if we're training compression, or rather resistance to compression, to pair that with a lot of bending they're kind of opposed goals a little bit. So I tend to favor ab exercises that are more static in nature. That's why I like things like ab wheel. You know, even though ab wheel is a dynamic movement, that there's movement, the action of the abdominals is anti-extension. It's to keep your spine from kind of falling through as you roll the wheel. If you don't have an ab wheel or don't want to buy an ab wheel, you can use a barbell. I did for a long time. You just put maybe a 25-pound plate or something on each side and do a barbell rollout. All right. Next question says, the GPP section includes 15 minutes of recovery stimulation. Is 15 minutes the absolute maximum, or am I allowed to do more, like once per week, two times 30 minutes commuting by bike or 45 minutes of swimming? You can do more, you can do less too. 15 minutes is the recommendation. So if you're looking at commuting by bike or something like that, I mean, look, man, that's your lifestyle. So do what you got to do. It's not going to, especially if you're used to it, it's not going to be a problem. But what you want to avoid, you don't want to go really long with it, especially once we get out of this recovery stimulation zone. But while we're doing recovery stimulation, you can do a little bit more of it. It's not going to hurt you. The higher intensity energy system stuff, there's a bit of a trade-off with that. So in general, this is just the recommendation. Going above or below that, the closer you can stick to the recommendation, the better off I think you'll be. All right, next question says, I was looking over the meet day warm-up template. The warm-up reps look like a small amount in comparison to what I normally do on meet day. Do you highly suggest following the template you provided, or is it best to do what I normally do for warming up? I recommend that you do follow the intent of what I recommend. I understand that the warm-ups that are in the meet card may be a little bit sparse compared to what some people are used to. Here's the thinking. For the squat, you have pretty much as much time as you want to warm up. So you can take a couple more warm-ups for the squat. For the bench and the deadlift, you're usually time limited, especially as you get to higher level meets, you will be time limited. So you won't have time to do a million warm-ups. Combine with that the idea that you're a little bit warm from squatting anyway, and then when you get to deadlift, you're a little bit warm from squatting and benching anyway. So you shouldn't need as many as you would normally need coming from cold to warm in training. So the idea behind the warm-ups that I selected in the meet card is to ramp you up from not doing that movement to being capable of doing your opener with that while burning as little energy as possible. So take, for example, the bench. We assume you're a little bit warm from squatting. So, and people generally don't handle a huge amount of weight in the bench, especially compared to something like the squat or the deadlift. So 4 warm-ups tends to be pretty good. You can take comfortable jumps and get to where you want to be. It doesn't take a really long time. Now, if you're used to 8 warm-ups, then that's going to be a really big shock to your system. So try to go somewhere in between. You know, I would also recommend that you kind of work toward a little bit fewer warm-ups in training. Now, you have to check and see if that's well tolerated. If you start to cut back your number of warm-ups and your shoulders start aching or something like that, or you don't feel warm, then those are problems and you need to go back to doing the more extended warm-up. However, if you cut back on the number of warm-ups that you're doing and everything is fine, then all things being equal, you're burning a little less energy and you're saving more time. So I would recommend kind of continuing along those lines. So those are my thoughts on warm-ups. If you have more questions on that, let me know. Contact me outside of, because this question is coming from someone who's competing this weekend. So if you're competing this weekend and you have more questions on meet card, warm-ups, etc., contact me outside of the normal coaching call rhythm, because you need to get those questions answered now-ish before you head over to the meet and start doing your thing there. Next question says, looking at the Raw National schedule, I don't weigh in until 4 p.m. Do you have any advice on how to navigate my nutrition that day? Currently, I'm sitting right at 158 in the morning, so I don't want to risk weighing over, but I don't want to starve all day either. Good question. That's tough because, well, I mean, for obvious reasons, it's tough. Weighing in later in the day is not easy. It's not something that people want to do. So if you're going to weigh in at 4 p.m., that's all day that you've got to sit around like that. So assuming that you're cutting weight at all, if you're doing a water cut, the good news is that you can continue drinking water until about 12 hours prior. So you can drink water until 4 a.m. And with that, you'll drop that water weight throughout the day, as you continue to go to the bathroom, but are replacing those fluids, you'll get gradually a little bit dehydrated throughout the day, which is beneficial for the weigh-in piece. Now, when it comes to eating, you will need to eat something. You don't want to go all day and not eat, but you need to check your weight frequently. Check your weight often. Definitely bring a scale with you, so that you have a scale with you in your hotel room. Calibrate your scale to the meat scale too, if you can do this a day or two in advance, so that my scale weighs me 1 pound heavier, or 0.2 pounds light, or whatever. You want to know how your scale is going to weigh you compared to the actual meat scale. And then what you do, you take whatever it is that you want to eat that day, so you're pre-weigh-in at this point, say a few hours, several hours before weigh-in. Take whatever it is that you want to eat, hold it, and stand on the scale. And if you can still make weight while holding it, then you're clear to eat it. Now, be careful with drinking fluids, because water is very heavy, but hopefully you're on, if you're doing the, kind of standard water cut method, then you're going to drink water up to 12 hours prior anyway. So it's only 12 hours. You're going to be super hydrated beforehand, so it's not like you're going to get extremely dehydrated throughout that 12 hours. So that's a good way to kind of ensure that you're controlling your weight without getting really dehydrated, basically. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, do a search for Maryland Powerlifting Making Weight, I think. There's an article by Matt Gary about how to make weight for a contest. We're getting a little bit late for initiating a water cut if you haven't done it already. So check that out ASAP if you don't know what I'm talking about. And it may be a little bit too late to implement, maybe not. You'll kind of have to figure that out and see how close you are to being at your weight class limit and stuff like that. But generally, the trick of standing on the scale with whatever it is that you want to eat, as long as you can make weight while holding it, then you're clear to eat it. All right. This question says, on my test day, I got 160 kilos in the squat, 100 kilos in the bench, and 200 kilos in the deadlift. Is my bench lower than it should be relative to my other lifts? And should I make any program changes as a result? My bench has progressed, but not nearly as much as my squat or my deadlift. Let me show you something that I've got. And this may be helpful for you. All right. This is a little tool that I made quite a while ago that relates each lift, its component Wilks score to a classification. Classifications are not really important. It's just a way to help us understand relatively like where does each lift rank and how good is each lift in comparison to the others. So I plugged your lifts in to this calculator and I took a guess at your body weight. Um, Given the numbers that you gave to me, I would say that your deadlift is, much better than your bench or your squat comparatively. Your bench and your squat are not really far apart. This is a fairly typical distribution. You know, we see this pretty regularly. And this also could be an artifact of the Wilks formula itself for this application. But the idea is that your squat and your bench are relatively close together in terms of overall classification, at least in my opinion. I know Greg Nuckols has put out some really interesting stuff in the last few weeks about comparing lifts and making these sorts of comparisons. If that's something that's interesting to you, you might want to check out some of his work. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't see a really big distribution here. You do look like you're quite a bit of a better deadlifter, or not a huge amount better, but you're a bit of a better deadlifter than you are a squatter or a bencher. That's not a problem. There's lots of people, especially at your level, that have one lift that they're more skilled at than the others. I don't think that's going to drive any program changes for you. It's something that will get better with time. All right. So next question up. This one says, I recently started playing with the software Kinevea to track my bar path. Have you used tools like that, and do you find the information it gives useful? I have played with some tools like that. I've run into some different outcomes. Sometimes it's useful. What I've used in the past more than Kinevea is a software called Tracker. It tracks a point frame by frame through the video, and you can make some inferences on acceleration and force production and things like that. You can use that to help diagnose weak ranges of motion. I've used it for stuff like that in the past. It is useful in that way. I don't put a whole lot into bar path. Generally, you can see if a bar path, see with your eyes, if a bar path is getting weird, and if it's only slight, then it's probably not a real problem. Bar path is something that seems to get better with time. I don't necessarily, drive people to correct technique and things like that based on bar path alone. Generally, what I try to get them to do is just improve typical like internal technique cues. I don't have them think about bar path very much. I don't have them concentrate on bar path very much, and that seems to get better with time as they perfect their technique. I mean, bar path could be an indication that something is wrong with technique, but it's not. I've seen people with, not super weird bar paths, but slightly weird bar paths that, technically nothing's really wrong. It just got away from them a little bit on that particular rep or something like that. So you can use it as an indicator, but I don't use software to track it. I don't think I really need to. I don't think the detail is that critical when we're talking about bar path analysis. All right, let's check out some videos. All right, first video up, we've got Olivia's deadlift. The question here is whether or not she should switch to conventional and then just in general technique. So let's take a look at this video. Well, to be honest, Olivia, I would really like to see a conventional pull from you before I made a decision on whether or not you should switch to conventional. What I see from your sumo, it looks pretty good, and it looks pretty mechanically advantaged. Now, granted, any well executed sumo is going to be more mechanically advantageous than conventional. Yet, some people pull more weight conventional than sumo. So, um, I don't see anything particularly wrong with your sumo. I think if you're curious as to how you would do with a conventional deadlift, let's find an off season, sometime when there's not a meet closing in on you, and let's try it out. Try out conventional for 4 weeks, monitor your results. We're going to be looking for two things. One is how much weight are you able to lift? What's your estimated 1 rep max? And two is your responsiveness to training. Is that estimated 1 rep max improving week to week? And then based on that, we'll decide whether to keep running conventional for a few more weeks, or maybe scrap the idea altogether, or we'll use that information to go from there. All right. Next up, we've got Olivia's bench. We'll take a look at this. We're watching this video for technique in particular. Do you need more leg drive? I don't really see the need for a lot more leg drive, especially in your current position. I would be concerned that if you tried to put a lot more leg drive into it, your butt's going to come up off the bench. So let me stop the video right here. Given where your feet are at, if you push with your legs, even if you're just kind of pushing knee extension, the tendency is going to be to get a little bit of hip extension too, and then it's easy for the butt to come up. If you can extend at the hips more now with your butt in contact with the bench, then that would be less of a problem. So how you would do that is you would move your feet further back and toward the outside. So if you put your feet more toward this area and kind of turn your heels out, so it's a wider foot position. I don't know if your hips can tolerate that or if your back can tolerate that, but in general, that's a good idea, and that allows you to drive with your legs and extend with your hips. But since your hips are already mostly extended, your butt's in contact with the bench, you can push as hard as you want, and your butt's not going to leave that bench. So that would be something to try, kind of away from competitions and things like that. Otherwise, I think your technique on the bench looks fine. I don't really see anything that's particularly noteworthy or something that I would change other than just that. All right. Next up, we have Diana's bench video. Just reviewing this video for technique. Okay, let's stop this video on the bottom as well. So you can see, you can get a pretty good idea in this video that there's not a whole lot of hip extension, and you can also tell that if the knees are above the level of the pad, the tendency is going to be for the butt to come off the bench. So here again, if you were to widen your foot position just a little bit, and your feet are back underneath your body a little bit more than Olivia's. So I don't think you need to go a lot further back, just a little bit more toward the outside. And that's going to help you produce that leg drive without the tendency for your butt to come up. But other than that, I don't see a whole lot technically that I would want you to change. Looks fine. Looks fine as is. All right. Next up, we've got Robert's squat. Reviewing this video for technique and depth. Robert's trying a slightly wider stance in an effort to reduce low back fatigue. So make sure I've cut them. All right. Yep, your depth looked fine to me. See if I can stop it in the bottom. Yeah, depth looks fine to me, and mechanically, everything looks fine to me. Just something that you mentioned in your email about your low back being the limiting factor for your pause squats and your tempo squats. I wouldn't make a lot of technical changes based on that. We make technical changes based on competition lift, and pretty much that's it. Everything else is just assistance work, and if your low back is a limiting factor for any assistance work, that's fine, and that may even be what we're trying to target. But you know, if low back is a limiting factor for the competition lift, we have to decide whether avoiding that is in your best interest or strengthening it. Regardless, what you've done here is not terribly wide. It's, you know, maybe you're slightly wider than before, but it looks fine. And your joint mechanics seem to be pretty well distributed. You're not overemphasizing one mechanic over another. Seems to be pretty well balanced. Check this out for a few weeks and see how your strength levels are. If your strength is good and improving, so your estimated 1 rep max is solid and you're responding to training, then continue. If any of those are out of whack, then we should have a conversation about what you should do next. All right, so that's it for the videos. So let's head back over to my smiling face. Got a couple questions left. The next one is an explanation. This one says, Mike, I had questions regarding the bench press. My sticking point for bench is around 3/4 of the way up. I did a set of 2 with the 2-board press this week, thus surpassing my sticking point twice in the same set with 315. However, when I attempt to touch and go bench with 315, I hit the same sticking point every time and cannot complete the rep. Do you have any ideas as to why this might be? Yeah, I sure do. So for one, the board work is a partial range of motion. So you may not be in the same technical position. We see this all the time with rack pulls in the deadlift. Somebody is deadlifting with a round back style, so they get stuck at the lockout. So their thinking is, well, I'll train my lockout with rack pulls. So when they do the rack pulls, they get in a more mechanically advantaged position. And so they're thus able to pull a house. None of it ever transfers to the competition lift because it's being trained differently. So that's one possibility. Another, and I would say more likely possibility, is that although your sticking point is maybe 3/4 of the way up, that is not your weak range of motion. I would say that you may be strong off the chest in those first couple centimeters even, but there's a weak range of motion that is some distance below that 2-board level. You're unable to produce force in that position, so your bar speed starts to bleed off. And while you may be able to produce an equivalent amount of force in this kind of, you know, let's say, you know, 3 centimeters to 3/4 of the way up range of motion, you may be able to produce an adequate amount of force. It's not enough to overcome that sticking point. So basically, when bar speed finally reaches 0 at 3/4 of the way up, you're done. So I would say that it's probably one of those two things. There's a weak range of motion that's below the 2-board level, or there's a technical thing that's not the same with 2-board work, or both. And it also depends a bit on how you're doing the board work. Some people do a light tap and go, which is what I recommend these days. Other people really sink it into the board, or smack the board a little bit harder. And if you do that, the board's helping you initiate that press, and that's not really the goal for your training. So hopefully that gives you some light on that. I would be really careful about misdiagnosing your weak range of motion. I find that it's really rare for a raw lifter to have a weak lockout. 99% of the time it's bottom or mid-range. Sometimes for me, I draw that line around 5 centimeters. So if somebody's weak range of motion is in the bottom, then it's below that 5 centimeter line. If it's mid-range, then it's slightly above that 5 centimeter line. And then top is, somewhere, kind of where you're talking about, more of that 3/4 lockout area. Almost all the time for raw lifters, you can get it moving off your chest. Otherwise, the bar just dies at chest level. Or, the weak range of motion is somewhere kind of in that first few centimeters. I would say within the first 6 or 7 centimeters at least. Like 99% of the people have a weak range of motion below 7 centimeters. And most people at that have a weak range of motion below 5 centimeters. So I would be careful as far as the diagnosis of that weak range of motion. All right. And then just to kind of wrap things up here, got a quick victory lap from our lifters. Just wants to say, hi, Coach. Before my question, which we already got to your question, I just wanted to say that my last test day this week, my Wilks score was 322. When I started RTS about 2 months ago, my Wilks score was around 285. All my lifts went up while I lost weight. I'm loving the RTS programming. Congratulations, man. That's a huge improvement. So 285 to 322, that's a 37-point increase on your Wilks in 2 months. Wow. That's like a year's worth of progress or more. So excellent work. I know the training is hard. It's supposed to be hard, but you're obviously doing well. You're doing well with your modifications, and you're thriving in the training environment. So congratulations. That's a really great improvement. So that is all the questions that I have for you guys this week. Thanks everybody who sent in questions. Thanks for those of you here listening live. I don't have any questions that came in, which is a little bit concerning, I think. I'm not entirely sure that I got any questions. I don't know if you guys are just not submitting them, or maybe you don't have any questions. But one way or another, give me some feedback on the new format. If you like this, prefer this, if you like the other format or the other interface better, would really like to know what you guys think about this. So with that said, thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you guys next time.